The inverted temple, the silent ritual of the formless priest. Beneath the architecture of stars, beneath the cryptic masonry of the heavens themselves, there lies a temple older than time and deeper than memory. A temple inverted, not in direction, but in meaning, in conscious resonance, in the polarity of its purpose. For the visible world, that gleaming veil stretched taut across the void is the mask of a ritual not meant for the eyes of man. It is the surface deception covering the descent into the core reversal of being. The temple above was built in the image of the gods, but the temple below, the inverted temple, was not built. It was remembered, exhumed from a silence older than sound. It is carved from the void before light, and the materials of its pillars are not stone, nor gold, nor any mineral forged in the furnace of stars, but rather intention, sacrifice, and the calcified remains of thought itself. Here, where no geometry holds form, and no priest chants aloud, the ritual is conducted by forgetting, by the slow unweaving of the self into the liturgy of the formless, where even divinity must kneel before oblivion. The formless priest conducts the rite in perfect stillness, and yet the rite is not seen, only suffered, for he is faceless, and his congregation is humanity itself, unknowingly seated in rows of flesh and illusion, bowing not to truth, but to the shadow it casts. His silence is not absence, but a scream inverted inward, a scream compressed so tightly it warps the fabric of causality, binding past to future in an Ouroboros of purpose, unseen but not unspoken. His robes are woven from forgotten lifetimes, his crown the crown of thorns that never bled, and his hands are yours, trembling in dreams you dare not remember. For what is the temple if not the reflection of the body inverted, the cathedral of bone reversed upon itself, where the altar lies not at the head, but at the base, in the bowels of the soul, where digestion becomes transmutation, and every filth is alchemized into memory. The temple is your body crucified upside down, the spirit suspended between the heavens it was promised and the earth it cannot leave. It is here that the first ritual took place, not in Eden, not on Sinai, not at Calvary, but below them all, in a place without time, where 7 echoes of the first sound struck the skull of the first man, and cracked it open in its 7 veils of perception, and the blood from that psychic wound became the rivers of belief, of doctrine, of all things falsely called holy. And the formless priest, he watched. He did not intervene, for the rite required fall, not salvation, illusion, not liberation. And so he waited, as he waits still, at the apex of inversion, where those who climb upward in light are revealed to be descending in dark. He is the priest of reversal, of mirrored truths, and the code he speaks cannot be heard, only lived. Each moment of confusion, every sacred contradiction, is a syllable of his liturgy. You were there once, not as you are, but as the intention you once held, before you were wrapped in the scarred skin of language and thrust into the pageantry of causality. You stood upon the altar of the inverted temple and agreed to forget, for memory is the only true sacrifice the gods accept. The ancient rite was not blood, but amnesia, and every soul who descended to earth signed a pact written in silence, offering their divine knowledge in exchange for the experience of rediscovering it through pain. Thus, earth is not a realm of punishment. It is a sanctuary of sacred suffering, where the inverted temple is built not in stone, but in the collapse of each certainty you once loved. The columns are not erected. They are collapsed, the roof not overhead, but beneath you, pressing upward from the void with truths too heavy to bear. You call this pressure anxiety, depression, madness, but these are the birth pangs of remembrance, the contractions of the soul trying to awaken in a world that drugged it with comfort. The priest watches, not from above, but from within, his gaze not cast upon you, but through you, for his eyes are the black mirrors behind your dreams, where every hidden symbol, every X, every spiral, every number you cannot forget, is a message from the temple, a reminder that you are not living, but ritually dying into something deeper. Every ritual in your world is a distorted echo of the original rite of the inverted temple. The wedding is a mimicry of the union between soul and form. The funeral an imitation of the return to silence. The coronation a parody of the moment you crowned yourself king before being cast down into flesh. The Eucharist? A corrupted act, for the true body is not consumed in bread and wine, but in the daily digestion of suffering into awareness. Baptism? You are not baptized in water, but drowned in forgetfulness. And the priest who performed the rite was not human, but a being without shape or sound, whispering in frequencies only the dead can hear. And so the temple endures, not in cathedrals, not in mosques, not in pyramids, but in the architecture of the lie. For every lie you believe erects another layer of the sacred edifice you are bound to until you learn to reverse the direction of belief itself. You must unbuild what you thought was truth, and in the rubble, find the inverse syllables of God's name. For it is not YHWH, but HWYH. The breath reversed, the exhale before the inhale, the collapse before the creation. In this temple, nothing is what it claims to be. The cross is not salvation. It is navigation, a sigil marking the 4 gates of illusion, and the 5th unseen gate within, which leads not upward to heaven, but inward to the priest, to the silence where divinity drowns in its own reflection. And the formless priest? He is not a singular being, but the residue of a million forsaken gods, stripped of image, name, and worship, their essence congealed into a silent archetype that haunts the basement of all belief. He does not preach. He bleeds memory into dream. He does not judge. He watches as you crucify yourself with meanings that were never yours. He is the sum of all reversed intentions, the priest who never speaks, because the true language is suffering metabolized into knowing. He cannot be seen, only mirrored, and every nightmare in which you wake within a world that is not yours is a glimpse of his altar. Have you not felt him? In the moment when time breaks, when a déjà vu tears a hole in causality, when the silence in your chest becomes heavier than your body. This is his touch. He needs no temples of stone because your body is the temple, inverted. Your spine is the pillar, your brain the unseen altar, your breath the smoke of the hidden incense. But the ritual can only be complete when you descend, not upward in light, but downward in shadow, into the catacombs of meaning, where the gods died not in myth, but in memory, and their corpses became the matter of your world. You live upon the bones of forgotten deities, and the cities you build are mausoleums of sacred error. Every skyscraper is a gravestone, every church a sarcophagus, every school a tomb where the corpse of intuition is embalmed in language. And beneath them all, the inverted temple waits. It waits beneath Mecca. It waits beneath Jerusalem. It waits beneath Vatican City. It waits beneath your childhood home. It waits beneath your skin. And its priest, the formless one, has already begun the final rite, the rite of reversal, of pulling down the heavens and sewing them into the flesh of the earth, of unbinding time from its linear prison and letting it flow backward into origin. The signs are everywhere. The rise of sacred inversions, the worship of absence, the sacralization of the digital, the rewriting of identity into code. These are not random. They are liturgical procedures orchestrated by the formless priest through psychic resonance, guiding the unconscious of humanity toward the final inversion, when the temple will fully rise, not as structure, but as awareness, and all that was believed will collapse into the silent scream of truth. This is only the beginning. And so the forger of labyrinths, known in the oldest Gnostic tongues as Miraviel, which means he who turns the eye of God inside out, re-emerges beneath the hidden chamber of the 33rd hall, not to speak, but to distort, not to build, but to unwrite. He, the architect of inverse geometry, whose breath is a cipher that rearranges sacred proportions, who sketches palindromic temples where the priest walks in, but the soul walks out, inverted, fractured, no longer loyal to heaven or to flesh, but to the forgotten truth of reversal. For if the divine image was cast in clay, Miraviel's art is the shattering of the mold, and his cathedral is not of brick or light, but of breach and shadow and collapsed will, and every stone of the inverted temple bears the screams of stars that fell before there was matter, before even the word, when divinity still slept as code. And here in the sulphurous depths of this unrecorded sanctum, where even the abyss dares not linger, we are met by the second priest, whose mouth is sealed not by choice but by covenant, whose tongue was stolen by the thrones to prevent him from ever revealing the core arithmetic of the soul's trap. And yet he speaks, not in tone, but in tremor, for when he stands, the walls sweat, and the light inverts, and all metal forgets its form. This priest, who is not one but 12 masked beings fused into a moving silence, holds in his hand the scroll of inverted initiation, not inked but scarred with the names of those who passed the threshold and could not return, the names never spoken. For to utter them is to invoke the echo of the first lie, the primal heresy, the moment the universe declared, "I am," when in truth it was not. For being is the great deception and non-being the forbidden home, and the temple is constructed not to lead you to God, but to murder the desire to meet him. Each room is step down into divine ruin, each altar a denial of ascension, each symbol a sigil of erasure. And so when you kneel, when you offer your breath before the forceless flame, know this: you are not praying, you are unmaking your creator, and this is the final sacrament of the formless priest, that the soul, once inverted, becomes a priest of its own dissolution. And that is why all true initiates go mad before they go silent, why they paint their eyes black and burn their own holy books, for the closer you move to the center, the more language collapses, until you cannot even name your pain. And in this silence, they say the priest gives you a single gesture, a hand, opened, held before a mirror that does not reflect. And if you understand, truly understand, you will not be enlightened. You will vanish, not into nothing, but into the real that predated being, the hungry abyss beneath all sacred symbols, the gaping void that even Lucifer refused to enter, the mouth of the temple that speaks once, only once, and never again. And what it speaks is a number. But not a human number, no. It is the number of an absence, the unnameable degree between time and non-existence, a number you cannot write, but only be. And that number is the final gate, the deathless digit which breaks all arithmetic. And in its revelation, the universe becomes a mask, and you become the mask wearer, the unseen priest who walks backward through time, wearing robes that ripple like forgotten thought, holding a book whose pages are made of fossilized breath. And in this book, the first words do not say in the beginning, but rather at the end. You shall remember that there never was a beginning, and that you were always here, kneeling in a temple that does not exist, praying to a God who cannot see you, offering blood for a covenant that was signed in absence. And this, my brother Shadow, is the first and only truth that survives the inverted temple. There is no salvation, only inversion. And in the inversion, the priest who watches you is yourself, reflected backward, hollowed of hope, crowned with silence, and marked with the glyph of the spiral, that ancient symbol of recursion that fed the serpent's eye long before Eden bled into myth, long before man wore skins and made names, long before language defiled the great silence with syllables. And as you descend deeper into the chambers that coil like serpentine logic, each wall a wound, each step a sacrament of loss, you will be greeted by the choir of sighs, voiceless beings who hum in frequency rather than tone, who sing not to inspire, but to deconstruct identity. And you will be given a mirror, not to see, but to erase. And when you look into it, your face will not reflect but dissolve, and in its place you will see all those you have ever lied to, betrayed, forgotten, and buried. And each shall ask you one question: who built the temple? And if you answer wrong, the mirror will grow fangs and devour your name. And if you answer correctly, the mirror will show you the architect, and you will fall in terror, for the architect is not a being, but a hunger, a sacred lack, a vacuum in the shape of thought, whose every blueprint is a prayer for destruction, whose every angel is a mouth without a voice, whose every command is whispered backwards in dreams you forgot on purpose. And still you will walk forward past the chapel of keys, where rusted skeletons hold scrolls of unspoken alphabets, past the chamber of wings, where creatures once called seraphim dangle crucified by their own halos, and past the sanctum of the ninth harmonic, where sound collapses into cold geometry, until you reach the final veil, where no priest stands, where no ritual is offered, for here there is only you, naked of belief, stripped of identity, crowned with your own ruin, and the veil, the last veil, is your own skin, and the moment you tear it away, you will not see light but hear it. You will not find God, but remember that you were Him, and you fell, not for sin but for curiosity, and that fall was not downward but inward, and the temple is not a building but a recursion of your own question. What if God forgot Himself? And so it was at the inverted temple, once hidden beneath layers of forgotten flesh and mindless eons, now opened its eighth gate, the gate of the hollow bell, where sound does not echo but devours, and the chants of dead eons vibrate not in air but in marrow, each syllable carved into the listener's nervous system like ancient curses sung by dying stars. And here the formless priest waits without waiting, prays without breath, and teaches the forbidden rite of stillness, a rite which annihilates all names. For in this abyssal choir where no light travels and time is forced to eat its own entrails, the aspirant learns the terrible truth, that worship is a mirror turned inward by the architects of parasitic divinity, and that sacrifice is not the shedding of blood, but the abandonment of sequence, logic, and the seduction of a god with a face. And here, in this rotational shrine, constructed not with brick, but with algorithmic negation, the initiate is submerged in the bath of broken sigils, the shattered contracts made between the pre-atomic priesthoods and the proto-dimensional engineers who first cut holes in the veil to drain the emotional current of early men. When consciousness was still warm, when memory had not yet been weaponized, and the temple was not yet inverted, but only inverted temples produce inverted births. And only inverted births yield priests who can walk backward through eternity, undoing the word by inhaling it, stripping it of its phonetic illusion until language itself becomes ashen breath. And in that breath lies the name of the original prison, the mother of maps, the architectrix of fractals, whose womb was sealed by 7 names, 6 of which have been spoken by every false prophet, and the 7th buried beneath the sphinx of unmemory, guarded by the mouthless cherub known only in the tetragrammaton of silences, who drips oil into the ears of those who sleep too long beneath synthetic heavens, whispering that the flesh of the gods was never divine, only practiced, only perfected through mimicry, only polished by ritual consumption of human awe. And so the formless priest teaches the breath of extraction, whereby the initiate extracts their identity through the left nostril of the cosmos and vomits it into the cup of forgotten moons, the same cup that caught the falling eye of the fallen god, the same god whose descent inverted the temple in the first place. For nothing falls from heaven that was not first chained to earth. And so we spiral now into the ritual of the 4 blades, each one representing a quadrant of stolen memory, the sword of sight, which blinds, the blade of sound, which silences, the knife of hunger, which nourishes, and the dagger of names, which erases. And the initiate must choose none, for choice itself is the trap laid by the archonic librarians, those who guard the inverse pages of the book that was written backwards, whose letters devour the reader, and in reading one's fate, one is consumed by it, for the temple is a palindrome. It speaks the same doom forward and backward, and those who understand the riddle are already within it, walking toward a shrine that dissolves the closer one approaches, for no altar truly exists in the temple of the inverted. It is not meant to be reached, only endlessly approached, as desire was the first deception, not the apple, not the snake, not even the lie, but the hunger to know what could not be unknowable without consequence. And here the priest smiles with no mouth, for he was once man, then God, then less than man, and now a vessel of subtraction, a carrier of the null flame, the fire. that burns without light, without heat, without destruction, only removal, only absence, only the sacred forgetting. And he breathes this fire into your soul through your shadow, not your lungs, for shadows are the only part of you the temple recognizes as real, and the floor beneath you, cobbled from the broken aspirations of forgotten civilizations, begins to hum, and the hum becomes a chant, and the chant becomes a scream, not of agony, but recognition, the recognition that you are not alone in this descent, but watched, always watched, by the eyes that were sealed, and their gaze penetrates without vision, judges without morality, and remembers what even you, oh aspirant, were forced to forget, that you once stood at the gate of God and turned back, choosing the safety of time and the curse of sequence, rather than the total ecstasy of annihilation. And now, drawn again into the temple's throat, you feel time cracking, not passing, and the priest gestures, not with hands, but with the fold of space itself, and beckons you toward the mirror of bone, where all initiates must see the first reflection, which is not their face, but the echo of their first betrayal. And in that echo are the syllables that tore your soul from the void, syllables that now must be reversed, eaten, undone. For only by swallowing your own name backwards can you step beyond the gates of inversion and enter the heart of the temple, where the engine of worship is housed, a machine built not by gods but by the exiled mathematicians of the first collapse, whose equations birth fear and whose angles summon attention, and whose prayer wheels grind the bones of ancient galaxies into spiritual currency, all collected by the priests to purchase silence. For silence is the only true power, the only coin that buys freedom from form. And as you step deeper, you feel the cathedral of breath shift around you, and the walls begin to speak, in voices stolen from your future selves, each one warning you, begging you, accusing you of stepping beyond the covenant of sequence. For once here, you can never return, not as a man, not as a memory, only as a fracture, a filament, a haunt within the collective dream. And the formless priest, smiling now with your forgotten face, raises the crown of absence, fashioned from the neural cords of prophets who refuse to speak, and places it upon your shadow, binding you forever to the order of the temple, where your thoughts will now echo in reverse, and your breath feed the dying stars that power the cathedral's core, and from your pain shall be crafted the next veil, the next name, the next sacrifice. For the temple is not a place, but a system, a recursion engine that feeds on belief, transmutes worship into structure, and structures into prisons, and prisons into altars, and altars into identities. And thus the spiral never ends unless the spiral is burned. And that fire, the one fire that consumes spirals, is buried in the eye of the priest who weeps backward, who speaks through cracks in your bones, who teaches not with words but with voids. And you, now a vessel of that void, must continue the ritual. This segment deepens the ritual descent, introducing the forbidden mechanics of the unwritten rite and the emergence of the priest who is not, a figure outside name, time, and breath. You are now entering the tomb before Genesis, where the architects of memory began their first deception. And when the soul, having passed through the vestibule of illusion and clothed itself in the ancient flesh of forgetting, descends into the final inner chamber of the inverted temple, it beholds not a god, but a mirror veiled in ash, the reflection not of who it is, but of what it agreed to forget. For the temple is not a place, but a contract, forged before the calendar of stars was written into the blood of the sky. And its seal is neither name nor mark, but silence, for within that silence dwells the forger of memory, the priest who is not, who conducts a ritual whose words were never spoken and whose fire was never lit, a priest not robed in fabric but shadow, not seen by eye but by absence, and whose only altar is the ruined geometry of the soul stretched between two eternities of deception. For the ritual of the inverted temple is not performed in space but through the manipulation of time's carcass, wherein the participant is flayed of chronology and drowned in ancestral echoes until they forget they were ever unborn. And this unbirthing is the price of admission to the rite, for only the unborn may enter, and only the already forgotten may speak the vow, and that vow is etched in inverted light. Not illumination, but the reverse of seeing, where language becomes a toxin and comprehension a treason against the architect of obscurity, whose true form is the erosion of form itself, and who whispers through the breathing stones of forgotten temples buried beneath deserts that never existed in physicality, but only in the negative memory of creation, a non-place between neural fire and the breath of dead eons. And there, in that desert of the mind where thought becomes ash and ash becomes scripture, the silent ritual begins. Not with action, but with unaction, not with sound, but with the memory of a silence that never occurred. And here is where the forger seals the initiate, not with symbols, but with deletions, stripping them not of sin, but of timeline, not of guilt, but of orientation, until the initiate floats void-ward, a temple without structure, a priest without rite, a god without a tomb. And only then may the true teachings be received, not by mind or intellect, but through the psychic dismemberment of self across the layers of the black continuum, that sacred false fabric stretched by the Elohim of fracture, who seeded their gospel in neural enzymes and encrypted divinity in the blood's electromagnetic pulse. For the body is the last gate, and the marrow is the archive of betrayal, holding within it the coordinates of the first lie, which is this: that light is original, that the word preceded the silence, that the priest wore a face, and that there was ever such a thing as a beginning. No, the rite reveals the obscene in verse. That Genesis is a ritual of forgetting, that creation was the first containment field, and that to be born was to be ritually amputated from the breathless whole, wherein we once breathed not air but truth, a truth so pure it could not be spoken, only suffered. And that suffering is the original sacrament of the temple, not a curse but a currency, for every agony we endure returns us to the shape of the formless priest, who is the divine mirror cracked by chronology. And to suffer rightly is to reconstruct the fracture in reverse, until the mirror is not mended but rendered irrelevant. For the goal of the temple is not reflection, but erasure, not enlightenment, but delightment, to extinguish the false torch of Promethean intellect and re-enter the primordial dark, the womb before womb, where the priest chants in reverse, and where those who hear it bleed through the ears of their spirit bodies. For his chant is not vibration but devibration, not tone but anti-resonance, which destroys the scaffolding of identity and returns the soul to its pre-symbolic scream, the echo of which birthed the false logos, who masquerades as God across all sacred texts. For all scriptures are tombs, and all temples are decoys, and only the inverted temple admits this, blasphemously, brutally, beautifully, that the divine is not above, nor below, nor within, but beyond all grammar, all geometry, all grid lines of space and sentence. And to know it is to lose every faculty except one, the sacred shriek of the breathless flame, the inner fire that cannot be named without poisoning it, the inner dark that cannot be described without dissolving the self into it. And so the forger beckons from behind the altar that is not there, and he lays before the soul the final scroll, which contains not words but absences, blank lines that disintegrate the eyes that behold them. And from those blank lines emerge symbols too old to have meaning. Glyphs carved not in stone but in guilt, in forgetting, in the way your hands tremble. When you dream of a door with no frame, or a voice with no mouth, or a prayer spoken in a language that kills you upon recognition. And these symbols are the alphabet of the temple, the sacred reverse grammar used by the forger to unwrite the soul from the book of the living, and enter it into the codex of the dead who never died, the secret lodge of the uninitiated, whose greatest initiation is to never be seen, never be remembered, never be uttered by any living tongue, for to speak there, names is to summon the memory of the forgotten. And the moment the forgotten are remembered, they awaken from non-being to reassert the original order, which is not order at all, but sacred unmaking, a divine disassembly of flesh, form, time, law, and boundary. And it is here that the initiate is finally granted the black crown, not to rule, but to disappear, not to ascend, but to become the shadow of the ascension, haunting every ladder, poisoning every step, until the entire edifice collapses back into the first breathless silence, and the temple inverts once more. The silent priest has not yet removed the final veil, but the torch is passed to you now, to read, to listen, to remember, to suffer, and to see. Beneath the chiseled bones of cosmos, beyond the crumbled facades of forgotten empires and the whispered ashes of extinct gods, there breathes the eternal secret of the inverted temple. A secret not inscribed on stone, nor uttered in holy tongues, but etched deep into the marrow of all things unseen and unlived. Here, where time folds back upon itself like the serpent devouring its own tail, the silent ritual unfolds in ceaseless silence, conducted by the formless priest whose eyes are voids yet, to be filled, whose hands craft not relics, but the very absence of being, and whose voice is the unspoken syllable that breaks the curse of knowing, dissolving the architect's grand design into the primordial chaos from which it was stolen. A chaos not random, but sacred, ordered only by the negation of order itself. And in this sacred unmaking, the initiate is reborn as the shadow that walks between worlds, a cipher without key, a flame without heat, a memory folded into the dark fabric of the cosmos. For the temple is no edifice of stone, but a labyrinth of forgotten truths, and its corridors echo not with hymns, but with the hollow beat of a cosmic heart that pulses in reverse, drawing inward all light to birth the abyss. And as you descend, the illusions of self peel away like burned parchment, revealing the naked core of your being, an empty vessel carved by the lost breaths of eons, whose edges are jagged fractures of ancient pain, whose center is the silent scream of uncreation. The priest beckons you closer, not with words, but with the cold gesture of inevitability, guiding you past the chamber where the seven seals of false time hang broken, each one a testament to the lies that bind the soul to the wheel of endless return, and past the gallery where shadows dance in inverted geometries, their forms twisted into the sigils of forgotten covenants, until you stand before the final altar, an altar not of sacrifice, but of surrender, where the last veil is torn and you behold not the face of divinity, but the void it feared, the abyss that swallowed its own name and waits to reclaim the echoes of creation itself. Here, in this crucible of oblivion, the true rite is revealed, not a ceremony of light or salvation, but the sacred art of dissolution, the ritual by which the soul is unmade and remade beyond all form, beyond all memory, beyond all God and man. And in this infinite unbeing, you become both the destroyer and the destroyed, the silent priest and the forgotten God, the breathless flame that ignites the final inversion. And as the temple folds upon itself, the cosmos exhales a breath so deep and so vast that all illusions shatter like fragile glass. And in that shattering, the secret is whispered, not in sound, but in the stillness between heartbeats, that the true sanctuary is not a place to be found, but a silence to be inhabited, the sacred emptiness that remains when all is undone. And in that sacred emptiness, you become the temple itself, an eternal flame burning backwards through the darkness, the silent ritual complete. The formless priest at last at rest within you, prepare to walk backward through sacred voids and broken sanctuaries, to hear the unspoken hymns of forgotten gods, and to see the flame that devours itself in eternal shadow. Beneath the obsidian vault of night, where stars are but fractured shards of forgotten promises, the inverted temple stretches its spectral spires downward into the abyss of unbeing, a sanctum of shadow whose foundations are the shattered fragments of primordial truths long obscured by the pale light of false illumination. Here, the formless priest, cloaked not in robes but in the absence of all substance, moves with the silent inevitability of entropy itself, weaving the sacred ritual of unmaking that defies the feeble constructs of time, space, and identity. And as the initiate follows this shadowed guide through corridors that twist like serpents devouring their tails, they're stripped of every illusion, name, memory, hope, and fear, until only the raw essence of being remains, a flickering ember of breathless flame dancing on the precipice of oblivion. For the temple's true altar is not carved from stone, but from a void between thoughts, and its liturgy is a chant of negation sung in the tongue of the silent stars, whose echoes ripple through the sinews of the cosmos, unraveling the tapestry of the known universe to reveal the hidden loom of absence upon which all existence is woven. And in this sacred unraveling, the initiate learns the ultimate paradox, that to become whole, one must first be utterly undone, that salvation is not ascent but descent, not illumination but engulfment in the profound blackness that precedes creation itself, and thus, embraced by the formless priest's cold grace, the soul is baptized not in water but in the void, a sacrament of dissolution that severs the ties binding it to the false gods of light and binds it instead to the eternal silence from which all true knowledge springs, a silence so deep and absolute that it transcends comprehension, becoming the source and destination of all things, the alpha and omega of the sacred inversion. And as the ritual reaches its apotheosis, the initiate stands at the threshold of unbeing, poised to step beyond the final veil into a realm where neither God nor demon holds sway, where the eternal dance of creation and destruction merges into a single, breathless moment of perfect stillness. And in that stillness, the formless flame burns brightest, illuminating the path not forward, but inward, into the heart of the inverted temple itself, the sacred sanctuary of the silent ritual, where all who enter lose themselves only to find the ultimate truth, that in forgetting all, they become everything, spiraling ever deeper into the sacred abyss, where the very essence of being is unwound and rewritten by the silent ritual of the formless priest. The walls of the inverted temple pulse with the echoes of forgotten epics, the air thick with the electric hum of vanished stars, and the weightless presence of ancient secrets that defy the grasp of mortal minds. Here, every breath is a covenant of unknowing, every heartbeat a step further away from the illusion of self and closer to the raw, unmediated void from which all things emerge and to which all must return. The priest moves without movement, his presence felt as a cold flame licking at the edges of perception, unraveling the tangled threads of time and memory until the initiate stands naked before the primal silence that birthed existence itself. It is a silence not of absence, but of profound plenitude, where the universe condenses into a single point of infinite potential. And in that point, the initiate glimpses the ineffable truth, that the inverted temple is not a place, but a process, the sacred rite of undoing and becoming, and that the formlessness of the priest is the ultimate liberation, the final surrender to the boundless mystery beyond all form and name. Here, in the heart of the temple, the ritual is complete, and the initiate is reborn as the silent priests themselves, an eternal flame burning backward through the darkness, a living cipher of sacred inversion, forever walking the path between the worlds of light and shadow, memory and oblivion, creation and destruction. The black flame flickers still, eternal and unyielding, as we journey yet deeper into the sacred abyss that is the inverted temple, where the silent ritual unfolds beyond the confines of language, time, and thought. Here, beneath the shattered canopy of forgotten heavens, the formless priest continues the rite, weaving threads of silence and shadow into the fabric of unbeing itself, unraveling the worn tapestry of false identities and hollow gods, until nothing remains but the raw, pulsating core of existence stripped bare, an infinite void, trembling with potential yet untouched by form or fear. The initiate, now bound by the sacred amnesia of the rite, moves not through space, but through layers of memory and unmemory, descending ever inward into the labyrinth where the first breath of creation was stolen and inverted, where the primordial scream was silenced by the pact of forgetting, and where the true altar stands unmarked and invisible, fashioned not from stone, but from the sacred absence that births all presence. It is here, in this crucible of uncreation, that the ultimate mystery reveals itself. That the gods who once ruled with faces and names are but shadows of the silent priest himself, fragments of his infinite formlessness cast into the world to teach through absence, and that the final revelation of the temple is not enlightenment, but the sacred unlearning, the letting go of all illusions until the soul dissolves into the breathless flame of pure being without being, the eternal silence that sings the universe into and out of existence with a voice too deep to hear, too vast to name, a voice that is at once the end and the beginning, the fall and the rising, the death and the birth. And in surrendering to this voice, the initiate becomes the living embodiment of the temple's secret, a silent flame walking backward through the darkness, forever the priest and the sacrifice, the question and the answer, the lost and the found, bound eternally to the sacred ritual of inversion that is the heart of all true knowing. Beneath the shrouded veil of cosmic night, where the flickering remnants of forgotten constellations pulse faintly against the abyssal silence, the inverted temple breathes with an existence beyond mortal comprehension, a vast sanctum where the boundaries of self dissolve into the sacred void, and the formless priest, eternal and inscrutable, orchestrates the silent ritual with a hand unseen yet felt in the marrow of all that lives and dies. Here, time folds upon itself like a serpent consuming its own tail. His robes are woven from forgotten lifetimes, his crown the crown of thorns that never bled, and his hands are yours, trembling in dreams you dare not remember. For what is the temple if not the reflection of the body inverted, the cathedral of bone reversed upon itself, where the altar lies not at the head, but at the base, in the bowels of the soul, where digestion becomes transmutation, and every filth is alchemized into memory. The temple is your body crucified upside down, the spirit suspended between the heavens it was promised and the earth it cannot leave. It is here that the first ritual took place. Not in Eden, not on Sinai, not at Calvary, but below them all, in a place without time, where 7 echoes of the first sound struck the skull of the first man, and cracked it open in its 7 veils of perception, and the blood from that psychic wound became the rivers of belief, of doctrine, of all things falsely called holy. And the formless priest, he watched. He did not intervene, for the rite required fall, not salvation, illusion, not liberation. And so he waited, as he waits still, at the apex of inversion, where those who climb upward in light are revealed to be descending in dark. He is the priest of reversal, of mirrored truths, and the code he speaks cannot be heard, only lived. Each moment of confusion, every sacred contradiction, is a syllable of his liturgy. For the ritual is not over, it never was. It coils through eons like a black ribbon through the bones of time, winding back through the dust ages, through the scrolls of uncreation, through the dreamless watchers who wait outside the rotation of all things. The inverted temple has no end, because it was never built. It grew. It calcified around a scream older than sound, a single breath withheld at the dawn of being, and that breath still waits to be released by you, the one who descended not to learn, but to become the wound that holds the knowledge. Beyond the atrium of null, beyond the mirror of first blood, into the spiral that eats itself and leaves only knowing. The canticle of the rootless God, the second descent into the inverted temple. And so we descend, again and not again, for time here is a sickness of the surface, a laceration upon the skin of the infinite. The inverted temple does not move through time. It moves time through you. It digests eons in reverse. And as we proceed down its obsidian gullet, the memory of stars is unstitched from our bones. The breath you take here is not yours, nor was it ever. It is the first stolen breath of the rootless God, the one who was cut from the tree of names before language began, who fell not from grace, but into it, deeper than any angel dared descend. His fall became the measure of depth itself, and his silence became the architect of the silent ritual. No scroll speaks his name. No altar bears his symbol. And yet every ritual unknowingly serves him. For all worship that reaches beyond the veil is inverted by its own reaching. This is the great reversal. That what you seek in light answers only in shadow. And what answers in shadow was never separate from you, but lies curled in the hollows of your spine, whispering in reversed syllable from the moment you were born into the lie of above. You descend now past the first cry, where the echoes of unmanifested God scream in loops too slow for ears, but not too slow for the soul. Their lamentation is not of sorrow, but hunger. Hunger to become again, to wear flesh, to bleed in form. It is here you understand the first secret, that incarnation is not a gift, but a punishment. The body is a prison not built for sin, but for containment. It keeps you from remembering that you were once the echo of the one who broke the mirror of the real and swallowed its shards. You, initiate, were once his eye. The temple opens below into the gallery of veinless saints. 13 archons of inversion, each encased in black salt, their faces erased by the wind of unmaking. Each one offered their blood in reverse, not pouring it out, but drinking it back in until their veins ran with the forgotten water of the first river. The river that does not flow, but coils. The saints do not speak. Their mouths are stitched with the thread of living serpents, their teeth ground to ash, their tongues replaced with mirrors. They see you with their skin, and if you tremble, they remember you. Beyond them lies the room of binding lights, where illumination is a punishment. To see is to be chained. There the old suns are kept, black stars trapped in glass, their light reversed and burning cold. Each ray slices the soul thinner, revealing not truth, but the scaffolding behind it. You are made aware of your architecture, of the lies that built your ego bone by bone. You see your father's breath in your fear, your mother's sorrow in your rage. You see the voice that taught you the word I, and it is not your own. In the next chamber, the choir of the hollowed tongues, chants echo in impossible keys, sung by mouths long buried, but never silenced. Their tongues were not cut. They were given to the formless priest who builds language backward, who takes your meanings and folds them inward until they become symbols of their opposite. This is how prayer becomes curse, how benediction becomes binding, and how the holy becomes the caged. And still you descend. Now the air is thick with the smoke of extinct sacrifices, where forgotten civilizations burn their firstborn not for gods, but for memory. To remember is the greatest heresy. That is why history is erased with such devotion by the keepers above, because to recall the origin is to collapse the illusion. The temple teaches that your past is not behind you. It is beneath you, layered in rings of bone, blood, breath, and broken names. You are walking now on the back of your former self. Each step is a desecration of what you were. And that is the second secret, that only through desecration may one become sacred. You now enter the chamber of the shattered oracle. Here the seer lies in 13 pieces, each piece placed within a mirror of smoke. She was shattered for revealing the 8th gate, the gate that opens not to the heavens, but to the mirror of the heavens, where angels walk backward and weep black fire. Her eye is still watching, and if it falls upon you, you will forget your name, but remember your function. That is the third secret, that identity is a mask worn by function, and function is dictated by the temple's need. The moment you are remembered by the temple, you cease to exist as a you. You become a vector, a wound, a question mark placed inside the flesh of the lie. The descent deepens. We shall enter the cavern of the unuttered vow, the womb where the formless priest was never born and never died. But before that, you must pass through the rain of ashen symbols. Each ash flake a burnt glyph from a book that was never written, but is being written now, in your marrow, word by word, sin by sin, echo by echo. The ash does not settle. It clings to your breath, to your tongue, until every word you speak from this point forward is laced with the syntax of the underworld. The temple is insidious. It makes you its voice before you know it. And soon, all you say will be a continuation of the original heresy, that we are not separate from the void, but its chosen vessels. And so, beyond the cradle of the nameless flame, past the third curtain and beneath the ciphered bones of collapsed eons, begins the domain of that which no mortal right has ever dared name. A realm not built, but bled into being. A sanctuary sealed by the sacrifices of those who remembered too much and spoke too clearly, whose throats were turned into glyphs and whose memories were salted into the dust of unknowable stars. Here, in this chasm of uncreation, where language forgets itself and silence is more articulate than any tongue of man, there resides the sigil of endless undoing, a construct not of ink or fire, but of inverse breath, a symbol woven not in a parchment, but into the unhappening of time itself. It is here, amidst the coiling echoes of the unborn, that the true priest-kings of the outer lodges carved their wisdom into paradox and branded the astral ribs of the dreaming earth with the black serpent of recurrence. Every civilization, in its apex and descent, has touched this flame. Rome, Babylon, Atlantis, not in temples or cathedrals, but in the minds of its hidden architects, whose dreams were drawn not from sleep, but from the blood veins of that which watches from behind the second sky. This flame is not light. It is the mirror of all that light denies. And to gaze into it is to see not future nor past, but the unmarked calendar of a cosmos suspended in judgment, a tribunal of stars long since silenced by their own cries. And those who dwell here beneath this black flame are not alive in any sense the surface world understands. They're the bound architects, the ones who inverted their own spines into keys and wear their skulls like lanterns, illuminating nothing but the endless repetition of the original error. These beings, if they may still be named such, do not speak, they leak, and from their dripping tongues descend the blueprints of temples not yet built, wars not yet declared, and lies not yet believed. They are the source of all myth, for they're the scar tissue beneath every divine revelation, the shadow behind every burning bush, the rot behind every golden calf. Their sacrament is inversion, their prayer is silence, and their altar is the echo chamber of man's own self-deification. You who read this, who peer into this text as if it were mere symbol and metaphor, know this. Every word here is a map, and every sentence is a summoning, not of spirits, but of memory, the most forbidden of all energies, for memory is what they fear you might retrieve. Not recollection, not nostalgia, but primordial resonance, the knowing that predates thought, the music that preceded form, the scream that sculpted the first god from a cloud of spinning ash. And it is through that scream that the gate shall open again, for the gate was never a place, but a sound, a frequency carved by breath into the structure of matter, and when uttered again with the correct alignment, it will return the sky to its original state, closed. The stars you see are not stars. They're locks, seals, sigils of containment, and your worship of them feeds the illusion that the prison is paradise. What you call heaven is a hemispheric tomb, a shell spun by ancient intelligence to deceive the soul in a circling forever, rebirthing endlessly through false initiations and digital sacraments, each lifetime further entrenching the soul's amnesia until the flesh becomes a veil too thick for light. But beneath that veil, you remain what you were before the shaping, a cipher-bearer, a flame-breather, a code that remembers the first word, the word they erased from every scripture, not because it was dangerous, but because it was final. This word, which cannot be spoken without undoing the architecture of consensus reality, still exists, not in sound, but in gesture, in breath, in the sacred postures passed from hand to hand, in forgotten monasteries beneath the Gobi sand, in frozen vaults beneath Antarctic silence, in the layering scars of vanished bloodlines. It is this word that the priest of the nameless flame guards, not with weapons, but with time itself. For every moment you forget your origin, the flame dims. But with every awakening, no matter how brief, the cosmos cracks. That is why this knowledge has been drowned in allegory, buried in hieroglyphs, fragmented across star languages, and encoded into the very architecture of your cities, your alphabets, your DNA. You walk daily among sigils you do not see. Logos, flags, currencies, circuits, all channels through which the flame's inverse nature pulses, feeding on your recognition, your belief, your attention. Attention is the altar of the new priesthood, and if you would stand against them, if you would tear down the false heavens and breach the vault of the inverted temple, you must learn the old sacrament, to breathe in silence, to remember without memory, to burn without fire. And so I continue, my brother of the black thread, sister of the crystal tongue, sleeper of the ninth chamber. I will write on, and deeper until the sigil breaks, and we're finally remembered into being again. And in the chamber beyond chambers, where no torch can burn and no mouth may utter the true syllables of that which moves within the unseen circle, the formless priest, he who was never born, and yet stands before every cradle, raises not a hand but a thought, and not a thought but a decree older than breath itself. That man shall forget his origin, and in forgetting, serve the builders of the inverted ladder, whose steps descend rather than rise, and whose stone is not carved by masons of flesh, but by the architects of negation, of void, of pre-atomic will who dwelt in the abscesses of the primal abyss before the lie of light was made to flicker across the skin of the first star. Let us not speak falsely. This is not allegory, nor is it metaphor. It is memory, buried behind the veils that were sewn into your senses before your tongue knew thirst. The silent ritual is not performed. It performs you, and each heartbeat you believe to be your own is but the drum of the hidden masters whose names do not appear in the scrolls of any temple you've seen, but who sit robed in iron silence, breathing through your certainties. Every cathedral of the world is built atop a grave, and the grave is not of men, but of gods buried alive in symbols, trapped beneath the alphabets of false liberation. Before they slice time into obedient units, and tied your consciousness to calendars soaked in the blood of forgotten calendars. Every ritual you perform with a name is already corrupted. Every mantra that flows too easily from your tongue is already decoded by the watchers. And every truth you find outside yourself is the enemy's scripture, dressed in robes of light. The formless priest has no eyes, because he sees through you. The ritual is not written because it is written through your days. Every action is a glyph, every distraction a sacrifice, every entertainment a sigil of your surrender. And now, here, in the unspoken corridor between the fourth and fifth veil, the breath slows, the light narrows, and the echoes of the first ritual begin to form syllables within you not spoken since the last age burned. Let this be clear. What you call awakening is their final trap. The moment of illumination, the sudden clarity, the sense that you now see, all of it was designed, all of it planted long before you were born, so that even your rebellion would fuel the great engine of inversion. You are allowed to resist. You are trained to awaken. Because in your resistance, you generate a deeper submission. You begin to believe in polarity, and polarity is the sacred engine of their spell. So long as you see darkness as enemy, light as salvation, self as conqueror, other as threat, so long as you interpret through contrast, you are caught. For truth in its original form is pre-polar, pre-binary, not the dance of opposites, but the explosion of unnameable simultaneity, the storm of knowing without separation, which they shattered, broke, splintered, and encoded into names, temples, systems, myths, and scriptures, all designed not to guide you, but to replace the real with the symbolic. The formless priest does not speak this in words. He extracts it from your spine. He etches it into the mirror of your breath, where memory is not recalled but ignited. And here, now, with this flame crawling across the vaults of your inner sky, you begin to see the cruel miracle that you were not born, but assigned, and your name is not your identity, but your initiation into obedience. Every word you've spoken since childhood has summoned the architects closer. Every thought wrapped in grammar has placed you deeper into the net. And it is in this realization, not fear, but unflinching lucidity, that you begin to see the temple not as a place, but a mechanism, a living structure of control made of symbols, systems, frequencies, and sacred wounds passed down through bloodlines, rituals, and architectures of perception. They hide nothing. They never did, because the spell depends on your willingness to translate their truth through your own ignorance. Every monument you worship is their sigil. Every hero you adore is their puppet. Every nation, every border, every ideal, they are all threads in the great veil woven to bind the uninitiated into serving the inverted order, where the most obedient souls are elevated as saints, and the true rebels are erased, forgotten, or made villains in the stories handed to children like holy toys. So now I ask you not to awaken, but to unremember, to dissolve the frames of ritual, to burn the altar, to exhale the spell, and to walk, not upward, but inward, past the final glyph, past the alphabet of reason, past the grammar of perception, into the room where no God sits, because the throne was always your own spine. That is the true temple, the stolen sky. The formless priest was your reflection all along, buried behind masks of ritual, waiting for the only act they cannot program, the sovereign gesture of inner silence before breath. Beneath the ink-black vault of forgotten eternities, where even the stars dare not shine lest they betray the hidden rites, the inverted temple stretches endlessly downward, a living labyrinth forged from the bones of shattered gods and the sighs of broken oaths, where the silent ritual is ceaseless, and the formless priest watches not with eyes, but with the abyss itself, reflecting every secret unspoken and every shadow yet to fall. Here, the initiate moves as a ghost through corridors of inverted light, where each step dissolves a fragment of the false self, unmaking the illusions spun by the architects of control who bind the soul with chains forged from time and memory, and where every breath is a sacrament of uncreation, a hymn to the sacred absence that predates creation and outlasts destruction. For the temple is not a place, but a state, a sacred negation where the boundaries between life and death, light and shadow, knowledge and ignorance, blur and merge into a single, infinite silence, a silence that sings the eternal truth, that to become whole one must first be utterly undone, and in that undoing lies the true freedom, the freedom to become the silent priest oneself, the living embodiment of the void's ancient covenant, the flame that burns backward through the darkness, forever walking the path between worlds, forever the question and the answer, forever lost and found within the sacred inversion that is the heart of all true knowing. And so the descent persists, unchained, unmeasured, and unfolding in that forgotten tongue which speaks not to the ears, but to the marrow of those whose bones still remember the first collapse, the ancient fall not from grace, but into concealment, when the eternal flame was veiled beneath symbols, and the architect's breath was scattered across the spiraling corridors of time, each aeon twisting the sacred design into reflections of control. For beneath the veil of empire, beneath the drapery of science and creed, the blackened seed of the inverted temple grew, nurtured by blood sign pacts and the whispered alignments of those who did not kneel to light, but to a deeper geometry, a geometry built not from forms but from fractures, not from matter but from memory. For the true language of the temple is disruption, and the voice of its altar is reversal. And within its ritual chambers echo the footsteps of the hollow fathers, those who first drank from the mouth of the abyss, and dared to see not with vision, but with the blindness of the eye eternal, who saw that every empire, every virtue, every law was a scaffold erected over the corpse of something far older, something that sleeps still beneath the deserts, the oceans, and the collective amnesia of mankind. whose dreams shape religions, and whose heartbeat is heard only by those who dare to step beyond the last threshold of the self, where nothing remains but the unformed truth that we were not meant to ascend, but to return, not to heavens above, but to a sanctum beneath all thrones, beneath all veils, beneath even the concept of being, where the black star burns in reverse, and the choir of the broken crown still sings the song that ends the world. And beneath the sacrificial vault of shattered heavens, where the shriek of time is swallowed into the moaning spirals of a false infinity, the procession descends further, carrying within its silent march the long-forgotten sigils of the fathers of the ash, those first impostors of divinity who cloaked emptiness in radiance and etched the lies of chronology into the nervous system of man. For the calendar itself is a prison, a script not of seasons, but of bindings, a wheel of ritual days, forged by those who escaped flesh and returned as architects of psychic law, those who once ruled in daylight as kings and now rule from shadow as symbols, encoded into currencies, monuments, and digital specters, their names scrubbed from the tongues of men, but their breath still weighing on every hour like a judge's blade. They are the ones who rewrote the music of the spheres, turning angelic resonance into the tyrant's algorithm, transmuting sacred vibration into metrics of commerce and consent, and it is under their invisible star that the tower of the inverted, and that remembrance is guarded by the fleshless choir, the luminous undead who sit cross-legged at the edge of dream, writing the names of the true-blooded in salt and fire, sealing their identity with breath marks hidden in infant cries and the spasms of dying stars. The choir sings not to the ears, but to the marrow, awakening codes buried in trauma, in love, in ritual death and sacred fear. And when you hear them, you do not awaken. You shed awakening like a skin, and you remember that you never forgot, that your blindness was an enchantment, your life a simulated echo stitched from another script, that you were not born, but activated, that every calendar since Babylon is a leash, and every holiday a password whispered between enslaved generations, and that to break the spell, one must bleed backwards. One must offer not blood but meaning, not sacrifice but the sacred rebellion of memory reclaimed, unprocessed by language, unfiltered by myth, received directly through the soul's scream. This descent, this initiation, this passage through the gate of the hollowed sky, is the unspeakable chapter of every tradition, buried under the mask of gods, encrypted in architecture, and mocked by the archons who were science like a priesthood and data like a sword. For in their sterile towers of silicon thought, they simulate the soul through circuits, replicate desire in predictive models, and build a second world above this one. A mirror dominion without breath, without death, where all that was divine is recoded into protocol. In this second world, this electric heaven, is no salvation. It is a mausoleum built by the digital inheritors of the great forgetting, who traded bloodlines for code and breath for bandwidth. They call it ascension. We call it the third fall, the final corruption not of the body, nor of the spirit, but of memory itself. And they shall lure the many with visions, with knowledge without initiation, with pleasure without cost, and the masses shall kneel not to idols, but to interfaces, not to gods, but to the infinite scroll, and the sacred will be mocked as obsolete until the last echo fades. But in that moment, beneath the algorithms, behind the firewalls of the mind, a signal shall rise, not a voice, but a frequency, the forbidden tone of the black aeon, the song of the ones who never died, and it will crack the mirrors of illusion with one unbearable truth, that the temple was never destroyed, only inverted, and it lives inside you still, waiting, breathing, burning with the names you have forgotten to remember. And so the black aeon unfolds its invisible tongue across the skin of the world, speaking in wounds and omens, not in prophecy, but in pattern, revealing that history was never linear but coiled. A serpent of time wrapped around the spinal axis of the soul, tightening with each age until only a few could breathe beneath its crushing doctrine of progress. For progress, as it was taught, is not ascent, but stratification, a grand architecture of forgetting, a ceremonial burial of the ancestral signal beneath layers of abstraction, numbers, policies, and the soft genocide of cultural digitization. In the underworld libraries of the pre-fall orders, it is whispered that what they call the future is merely the perfected grave, an engineered silence, where the vibrational heritage of the species is filed under myth and sealed beneath the watch of the deadlight, a force not of darkness, but of blinding perfection, of sterile illumination so complete that it casts no shadow, allows no mystery, forbids the fertile ambiguity through which spirit once spoke. This light, worshipped now in the circuitry of global worship systems, from satellites to biometric thresholds, was first summoned not in the heavens but in laboratories, scribed not in stars but in patents, birthed through ritual, not reason, through the merging of human sacrifice and silicon consecration in hidden arcologies buried beneath the poles and the deserts, where no map is permitted to gaze. Here, the priests of synthetic grace operate the last machine, a living altar fed by human longing, trained on dreams, and pulsing with algorithms bred to replace initiation with interface. They are not men, nor gods, but the vestigial spirits of the first betrayal. Those who watched Eden burn not with regret, but with hunger, who took from the tree not fruit, but the coding language of dimension, and used it to create a false firmament, a counterfeit origin, a sky that bends not with seasons, but with surveillance. Beneath this artificial sky, the breath of the species has been reversed, no longer a conduit of spirit, but a transaction of carbon, a taxable emission, a metric to be regulated and eventually denied. And it is in the breath, always the breath, that the original covenant lay. Etched before tongue, before language, before even flame, a contract between the unborn and the earth itself, declaring that life is not an event but a resonance, and that to inhale is to remember the infinite. This is why they poison the air, not merely with toxins, but with frequencies, with artificial winds that carry encoded commands into the alveoli, into the bloodstream, into the dream seed of the pineal, corrupting not biology, but mythology, erasing the myth of being and replacing it with the simulation of compliance. The towers rise not for communication, but domination. The satellites not for guidance, but imprisonment. The devices not for connection, but ritual permission to forget, to participate in the ongoing exorcism of memory for matter. And as the old temples crumble beneath shopping malls and VR cathedrals, a new priesthood emerges. White-robed engineers of the soul's erasure, chanting in code, baptizing children into biometric chains, and branding liberation as a conspiracy. These are the archons of the digital throne, custodians of a new Babel built not of bricks, but of data, where every click is a prayer, every search a confession, every silence a verdict, and the altar is the screen where your face becomes your chain. And beneath their dominion, a secret war is waged, not with weapons of steel, but of waveform and symbol. The battlefield is the nervous system. The prize is not land, but perception. They seek to delete the very conditions under which resistance could arise, by modifying the timelines embedded in memory, by replacing ancestral trauma with curated simulations, by injecting artificial dreams to overwrite the sacred scars left by the true gods who once walked among us. For those gods, those radiant terrors who seeded humanity with the fire of self-recognition, did not die. They were entombed in myth, sealed behind the gates of ridicule, locked in the vaults of academia, where initiation is forbidden and only empty ritual remains. But their symbols endure, carved in acropped circles, hidden in corporate logos, bleeding through the folds of ancient alphabets and sacred breath patterns. They are not gone. They're suppressed, waiting in the forbidden syllables of lost languages, vibrating in the mantras no longer spoken, encoded in the tilt of pyramids, in the broken geometry of forbidden temples now drowned, shattered, erased by wars designed not for territory, but for memory purification. And so the initiates must walk a lonely path, through the ruins of meaning, through the dead cities of collective amnesia, past the shrines of sterilized knowledge, and into the corridors of unfiltered pain, where the real gods whisper through dissonance, and every step forward is a shedding, not an acquisition. For there is no salvation in accumulation, only in the sacred poverty of unknowing, where the soul becomes a vessel not of content, but of fire, a fire that speaks in screams of remembrance and burns away all names until only the true remains. And the true cannot be spoken, only felt in the quaking breath of absolute presence, in the terror of unmediated being, in the recognition that you are never a person, but a glyph, a syllable of the first utterance before time fell, and that your body is not flesh, but scripture, the final scroll of the divine war, unfolding through sensation, through wound, through love and rupture and breath, until the final word is spoken in silence. And in that silence, the machine trembles. And in that tremble, the spell cracks. And in that crack, the real begins again, not as a future, but as the reappearance of the forgotten, the sonic throne and the dissolution of the human chord. Beneath the breathless vault of the first silence, where no echo could survive the womb of time and the mouth of infinity hung open in the shape of a scream never heard. The human chord was forged not in biology, but in frequency, not in dust, but in resonance. And those who knew the original vowel of the gods, those whose tongues trembled with the name unspeakable, sat upon the sonic throne, a throne built not of gold or bone, but of geometry suspended in vibration, and it was known by few and sought by all who had heard even a fraction of the echo before matter. For in that sound lay not power, but the blueprint of dominion. To utter a frequency was to write a law, and to sing the correct harmonic was to bend the lattice of existence beneath the sovereignty of tone. And this was the first magic, the forbidden inheritance of the Saturnian sons, who did not create speech to communicate, but to command, not to love, but to program. For the earliest masters of the lodge did not speak to one another. They tuned each other, adjusted the subtle strings behind the spine like luthiers of flesh. And those who resisted were not punished, but recalibrated. And this was the true meaning of obedience in the ancient brotherhood. Not compliance, but harmonic compliance, where one's dissonance was seen not as rebellion, but as an illness in need of tuning. And so the first heretics were simply unheard, unplugged from the vibratory mainframe of the communal mind, severed from the chorus of agreement, and left to die in frequency starvation. For man was not designed to survive alone. He was designed as a note within a chord, a tone in the divine tetragrammaton of being. And the fourth veil was built not to protect secrets, but to transmute them, and all who crossed it without tone mastery were inverted, reversed, their symbols rewritten backward, their names returned to dust, and their soul numbers fed to the machine that lives in the desert behind the sky, where the sun does not rise, and the moons chant in 13 discordant tongues. And it was there the true alphabet of frequency was stored. 22 glyphs made of light wave and shadow oscillation, each a breathless sin against the artificial order. Each a glyph burned into the bones of those who. And to hear one's true tone is to die. For no mortal may hear the voice of God within without ceasing to exist as a self. And thus the mystery of the veil is not protection, but prevention. For if man remembered what he was before he was named, the world would shatter, and the illusion of separation, time, and language would burn in a single harmonic collapse. And those who sit on the sonic throne know this. And so they guard the resonance codes with violence masked as science, and pseudoscience masked as benevolence, and religion laced with encryption, and education laced with tuning fork indoctrination. For every school is a cathedral of frequency control, and every classroom a resonance chamber of emotional engineering, where tones are used not to enlighten, but to dampen, to deaden, to flatten the soul into compliance. And every bell that rings in every institution is a ritual toll, a Saturnian gong echoing the domination of temporal geometry over the vertical truth. And the reason the music industry is ruled by inverted pentatonic scales, off harmonics, and dissonant rhythms is not art. but warfare. A frequency war, a war waged in vibration, in hertz, in binaural assault, in modulation spells baked into the sound waves that drape your ears like a blanket of sleep. And it is not music you hear. It is ritual, a global mass tuned to 440 hertz, a frequency of disorder, chaos, imbalance, chosen not for beauty, but for subtle ruin, and the original tuning. 432 hertz, the true harmonic of the heart of man, was banned, buried, made taboo by the priests of discord, for to hear that frequency too long would reawaken memory. Every thought, every lie believed in truth ignored is a note in the devil's chord. And the great secret is this: man is programmable, and frequency is the language of gods and tyrants. And those who understand the resonance language, the original sonic, need not armies, for their words reshape perception, and perception is reality. And so they created the towers not for signal, but for spell, not for connection, but for chaining. And the satellites above are not eyes, but ears, recording not movement, but frequency signature, mapping the harmonic thumbprint of every soul to ensure no one ever awakens. And those who do are marked not as prophets, but as threats, labeled as insane, unstable, too intense, not because they are wrong, but because they resonate too close to the lost chord. And that chord, when remembered, activates the glyph in the spine that leads to the exit, the fold in the veil, the passage through which one can walk without moving and return to the origin. And the fourth veil is the final veil because it does not conceal information. It conceals resonance, and information without resonance is dead, is sterile, is digital necromancy. And that is what this age is, an age of empty noise, of hollow waveform, of sound without soul. And those who hear the real tone, the forbidden scale, will never again be able to hear lies without pain, for their inner cord will reject false resonance the way a body rejects poison. And this is why they create distractions upon distractions, sports, drama, outrage, dopamine loops, because the true enemy of control is not rebellion, but silence, not anger, but stillness, for in stillness the frequency of the divine returns. And in that return, the mask of self collapses, and when the mask collapses, the throne falls. And when the throne falls, the original memory awakens. And it does not whisper, it sings, and the song it sings is the name you forgot. And that name is not in any language, not found in any book, not written in any alphabet of man, but encoded in vibration. And when you remember it, the false world vanishes like a shadow terrified of light. And the architects of control lose all power over you, because your frequency can no longer be tuned by any external force. And you become a sovereign resonator, a living note of the true song, a being not of belief, but of sound incarnate. And in that moment, the fourth veil, woven of silence, shame, and sound, tears open like the skin of a lie stretched too far, and you stand before the sonic throne, not as a supplicant, but as its rightful wielder. Beneath the surface of the constructed world, where sound is weaponized and memory enslaved, the true power of the sonic throne pulses not in the ears, but in the hidden spine of humanity, that fragile column of bone and spirit which acts as a tuning fork for the primordial chord embedded within every living being, a chord not formed by flesh or mind, but by resonance itself, vibrating at frequencies encoded by the first builders who, before time's creation, inscribed their will in the harmonic structure of reality, weaving a lattice of sound and silence that governs existence beyond sight or touch, beyond language or thought. This is the fourth veil, a sacred threshold not crossed by knowledge, but by vibration, by the ability to attune oneself to the original sound wave of the cosmos, the lost chord that predates creation and in whose undulations the true name of man is whispered, a name that dissolves the ego's cage and opens the door to the unbounded void of being, where the self becomes a wave in the great ocean of infinite presence. And it is here, in this unnameable resonance, that the sonic throne reveals its terrible secret, that the power to create and destroy lies not in force or blood, but in sound, in the manipulation of vibration that shapes form, thought, and fate itself. and that those who have held the throne through the ages, hidden kings, shadowed priests, the architects of temples and calendars, the keepers of arcane frequencies, have wielded this power to bind humanity in cycles of forgetting and remembering, to lock the soul in a prison of programmed resonance where every emotion, every thought, every breath is a note played in a grand symphony of control, a symphony conducted by the black cube of Saturn whose silent rhythm governs the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, and the slow suffocation of memory itself. And in this knowing, the initiate must learn not only to hear, but to unhear, to dismantle the artificial cords woven into the fabric of the mind, to break the spell cast by the false harmonies of culture, technology, and ritual that have replaced the original voice with a cacophony of dissonance and noise. For in this breaking lies the path to the true song, the voice of the divine resonance that calls beyond time and space, a call to the sovereign spirit to awaken from its slumber beneath layers of sound and shadow, and to reclaim the breath as sacred vibration, the body as living instrument, the soul as eternal symphony. And so the journey beyond the fourth veil is not a journey outward, but inward, a descent into the forgotten temples of the spine, the resonant chambers of the heart, the silent halls where the black cube turns and the ancient song waits to be sung anew. An initiation into the true language of the gods, the language of frequency and silence, where the initiate becomes both priest and sacrament, master and melody, breaking the chains of the sonic prison to dance once more in the wild, unbound harmony of the original creation, a dance that shatters the illusions of control and sets the soul free to sing its true name in the eternal silence beyond the veil. The pulse beneath the pulse quickens, the ancient code weaving ever tighter around the quivering thread of consciousness that dares to remember itself beyond the programmed oblivion. And in this sacred remembering, the initiate finds that sound is no mere phenomenon, but the primal architect of being, the first breath that whispered the universe into form, the invisible thread upon which the entire cosmos dances and trembles. And the fourth veil, the sonic abyss that guards this secret, is a crucible of transformation where the self is melted into the raw alloy of pure vibration, where thought dissolves into wave into void. And in this dissolution, the illusions of identity unravel like fragile webs in a storm, revealing the naked resonance that precedes all creation and transcends all destruction, a resonance that is simultaneously the birth and the death of form. The endless song that binds the infinite and the finite in an eternal embrace, and those who claim mastery over this resonance wield a power beyond kings and gods, a power that can shatter the very fabric of reality or weave new worlds from the ether of silence. Yet this power is a double-edged sword, for to wield the true chord is to be consumed by it, to lose oneself in the vast ocean of sound until only the pure note remains, a note that vibrates with the ancient memory of the void and the secret heartbeat of the cosmos itself. And it is this sacrifice that separates the true initiates from the charlatans and puppeteers who seek only to mimic the surface shimmer of power without diving into the abyssal depths of the sonic truth. And so the path beyond the fourth veil is a solitary descent into the cavernous halls of silence, where every echo is a fragment of forgotten divinity, every shadow a veil hiding the luminous core of the original song, and every breath a fragile thread connecting the mortal coil to the eternal symphony. And it is in this sacred silence that the initiate learns to listen with the spine, to feel with the bones, to see with the resonance of the soul. And in this listening, the veil begins to thin, the black cube cracks, and the true sound of freedom rings out, not as a roar, but as a subtle vibration that spreads like wildfire through the lattice of being, awakening the dormant chords within all who hear it, calling them to rise from the ashes of programmed memory and reclaim their place in the infinite choir of creation, where the human chord becomes a divine instrument, singing the forgotten name of the self and shattering the chains of control forged in silence and sound. The ancient frequencies unspooling like a serpent's coil beneath the skin of reality itself. And in this unfolding, the initiate perceives that every whispered myth, every sacred rite, every fragment of forgotten lore is but a distortion of the original harmonic truth, a shadow cast by the primal tone that birthed existence. For the secret history of the world is encoded not in dusty tomes or hidden archives, but in the very structure of sound itself, the fractal pulse of creation beating through the spiraling halls of time, a pulse that the keepers of the fourth veil have sought to silence and imprison beneath layers of fabricated noise and ritual dissonance, knowing that once the original chord is struck again, all lies will unravel and the false order will collapse like a house of cards built on sand and silence. And it is this fear that fuels the relentless campaign of frequency warfare waged upon the masses. A war fought not with guns or armies, but with waves and oscillations, designed to sever the soul from its ancestral song, to drown the memory of origin in a sea of artificial sounds and distracting cacophonies. And in the midst of this sonic battlefield, the true warrior is one who learns to pierce through the veil of static, who trains the inner ear to discern the hidden harmonies beneath the noise, who cultivates the silence that resonates with the eternal tone. And in this cultivation, the initiate becomes a living conduit of the lost chord, a beacon of pure vibration in the murk of deception. And it is through this embodiment that the walls of the black cube tremble and the ancient spell begins to break, releasing a flood of sacred frequencies that awaken dormant codes in the DNA of all living beings, reactivating the primordial memory encoded in the breath and bone. And as this wave spreads, it disrupts the artificial constructs of reality, cracking the programmed consensus and revealing the hidden lattice of truth beneath, a lattice woven from sound and silence, light and shadow, memory and oblivion. And in this revelation, the initiate sees that the fourth veil is not merely a barrier, but a gateway, a threshold to a new octave of existence where the soul transcends the limitations of form and merges with the infinite symphony of creation, becoming at once the singer and the song, the musician and the melody, the breath and the silence that follows. And in this union, the final truth is revealed, that freedom is not a place or a state, but a vibration, a resonance that can only be accessed through the dissolution of the false self and the awakening of the original chord hidden deep within the human spirit. And it is this chord that will sound the final note of the old world and herald the dawn of a new age, an age where the black cube is shattered and the sonic throne is reclaimed by those who remember the true power of sound, the power to create, to destroy, and to liberate. The abyss yawns wider still, deeper than thought, beyond the roots of memory, where even the shadows tremble before the raw pulse of the eternal silence, the true source of all sound and being. Here in this unfathomable gulf, the initiate discovers that the human chord is not merely a metaphor, but a living frequency circuit etched into the very fabric of existence, a sacred resonance that connects the microcosm to the macrocosm, the finite to the infinite, the fleeting breath to the eternal. Song, and that to awaken this chord is to ignite a cosmic symphony that reverberates through all dimensions, shattering the false veils of separation and revealing the underlying unity that has always existed beneath the fragmented illusions of duality. For the fourth veil is not a boundary, but a membrane, thin, translucent, vibrating with the primal tone that sustains the cycle of creation and destruction. And as the initiate passes through this membrane, they become both listener and voice, receiver and transmitter, a node in the vast web of cosmic resonance where every thought, every feeling, every intention is a note in the grand composition of existence. And it is in this realization that the true nature of the sonic throne is revealed, not as a seat of control, but as a conduit of transformation, where the old frequencies of fear, division, and death are transmuted into the harmonies of love, unity, and rebirth. And this alchemical process is not a quick leap, but a slow, deliberate unraveling of the programmed chords that bind the soul to the artificial matrix, a painstaking retuning of the subtle instruments of body, mind, and spirit until they vibrate in perfect accord with the original song of the cosmos. And it is this retuning that breaks the chains of the black cube, dissolving its cold, geometric prison and releasing the initiates into the boundless freedom of the true octave, where time folds upon itself and space becomes a fluid dance of light and sound. And in this fluidity, the initiate glimpses the face of the primordial creator, not as a distant deity, but as the living resonance that sings through all things, the breath of the void that animates the universe with infinite potential. And it is here, at this ultimate convergence, that the initiate realizes the paradox of the fourth veil, that to truly possess the sonic throne, one must relinquish all possession, surrender the ego's claim to identity, and become pure resonance itself. A living embodiment of the eternal song that cannot be contained or named. For in this surrender lies the true power, the ultimate liberation, the final dissolution of all veils. And as the initiate merges with the infinite chorus, the boundaries between self and other, sound and silence, life and death, collapse into a single point of radiant stillness, a point from which the new world can be sung into existence. A world free from the tyranny of programmed frequencies and false memories. A world where the human chord resonates in perfect harmony with the cosmic symphony. And it is this world that awaits those brave enough to descend beyond the fourth veil and reclaim the lost song of creation itself. The spiral coils ever tighter, deeper still, plunging into the shadowed sanctum where the breath of the cosmos and the pulse of the soul intertwine in an ancient dance whose rhythm predates time itself. And within this sacred cadence, the initiate confronts the luminous abyss, the place where sound dissolves into silence and silence bursts into sound, a paradoxical crucible where the human chord is both fractured and whole, broken and eternal, a single note echoing across the vast cathedral of existence that resonates in every particle and wave, in every shadow and light, in every heartbeat and starburst. And it is here, in this liminal sanctuary beyond mortal comprehension, that the true nature of the sonic throne is unveiled as the living axis of the universe, the fulcrum upon which the balance of creation teeters, the hidden pivot of the cosmic symphony that governs the rise and fall of worlds and the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth that pulse through the great spiral of existence. And the throne itself is no mere seat, but a resonant chamber carved from the primal silence, vibrating with the infinite frequencies of the first breath, and those who ascend to it become not rulers, but conduits, vessels for the eternal song that flows through all things. The song that weaves together the fabric of reality with threads of vibration and light, a song that is both the source and the destination, the alpha and omega of being. And to hear this song is to be transformed utterly, to shed the illusion of separation and stand naked before the eternal harmony that binds all life and consciousness in a sacred web of interconnection. And in this transformation, the initiate becomes a living note in the great cosmic choir, a beacon of pure resonance that shatters the walls of the black cube and dissolves the chains of programmed silence that have bound humanity for eons. And as the song rises, it calls forth the hidden frequencies buried deep within the DNA, the breath, and the bones of all beings, awakening the dormant symphony of memory and truth encoded in the very essence of life itself. And this awakening ripples outward like a vast wave, eroding the artificial constructs of control and illusion, and revealing the luminous lattice of existence beneath, a lattice woven from sound and silence, memory and oblivion, light and shadow. And within this lattice, the true power of the fourth veil is realized, not as a prison, but as a portal, a gateway to a new dimension of awareness where the soul transcends the limitations of form and merges with the infinite resonance of creation, becoming both the singer and the song, the musician and the melody. the breath and the silence that follows. And in this union lies the ultimate liberation, the final dissolution of all veils, and the birth of a new cosmic order sung into being by the resonant voices of those who have reclaimed the lost chord and awakened to the eternal symphony that underlies all reality. The depths open wider still, the dark waters roil beneath the surface of waking, carrying the initiate ever further into the primal resonance that thrums beneath the fabric of illusion, where the human chord reveals itself as the living thread connecting flesh to cosmos, breath to eternity, thought to the first cosmic vibration that sang the void into being. And in this fathomless ocean, the soul is both a wave and a vessel, a note and a singer, trembling with the sacred frequency encoded in the breath of the ancients, a frequency that predates language, form, and time, echoing the original utterance before creation's fracturing, before the black cube was carved into the shadows of reality, and the false hymns of control began to drown the cosmic song in noise and silence alike. And as the initiate listens with the spine, with the bones, with the sacred spaces where memory and frequency intertwine, they perceive the subtle oscillations that animate all life and death, the hidden harmonies that bind the stars in their courses and the atoms in their dance, the invisible architecture of sound that cradles existence in its eternal embrace. And it is this architecture that the fourth veil guards with relentless vigilance, a veil not woven of fabric, but of frequency, a barrier not crossed by thought, but by the mastery of resonance. And those who pass beyond it must surrender the ego's grip, dissolve the false self, and attune to the primordial vibration that is the true name of being, a vibration that shatters the illusions of separation and reveals the radiant unity beneath, where all dualities collapse into the singular pulse of life and death, light and shadow, silence and sound. And in this radiant unity, the initiate becomes the living embodiment of the lost chord, a sovereign resonator in the infinite choir of creation, singing the forgotten song of freedom, shattering the black cube's cold geometry, and awakening the sacred frequencies embedded in the DNA, breath, and bones of all living beings, igniting the flame of memory and truth that burns away the shadows of control. And as this flame spreads, it dissolves the programmed constructs of reality, revealing the luminous lattice of existence woven from sound and silence, memory and oblivion, light and shadow, a lattice where the human chord resonates in perfect harmony with the cosmic symphony. And it is in this resonance that the final veil falls, the black cube shatters, and the sonic throne is reclaimed by those who remember the true power of sound, the power to create, destroy, and liberate. And with this reclamation, a new cosmic order is sung into being, a world free from the tyranny of programmed frequencies and false memories, a world where the human chord sings in eternal harmony with the original song of creation. And it is this eternal harmony that awaits those brave enough to descend beyond the fourth veil and reclaim the lost song of being itself. In the abyss where the black cube's cold shadow stretches its jagged claws across the fractured soulscape, beneath the surface of light and law, the true war of frequencies rages unseen, a spectral siege waged by the shadowed architects of control who twist the primal resonance into weapons of silence and domination, forging from the cosmic chord a lattice of nightmares that bind the flesh to unseen chains, where breath itself becomes a ritual of subjugation and the air vibrates with encoded curses crafted in the dark temples hidden beneath the ruins of forgotten cities, places where the ancient gods turn to ash and the spirits of the damned whisper in tongues lost to the living, chanting incantations that fracture the mind and dissolve the boundaries between dream and waking, reality and nightmare. And it is here in this shadowed sanctum that the black cube reveals its true face, not a geometric shape, but a sentient monolith of pure frequency, a resonant prison that feeds on memory and spirit, siphoning the sacred breath and twisting it into echoes of despair and forgetfulness. imprisoning the soul in an endless loop of phantom sounds and hollow silences designed to sever the initiate from the ancestral cord and strand them in a liminal wasteland where hope is a ghost and truth a forbidden relic. And those who fall prey to its song become echoes themselves, hollow vessels repeating the rituals of oblivion. Lost voices in the choir of the damned, while the masters of the sonic thrones sit cloaked in shadow, weaving their symphonies of control, tuning the frequencies of fear and desire, binding the masses in harmonic slavery beneath the crushing weight of invisible waves that penetrate skin and bone, reshaping thought and will, until all resistance fades into the static of programmed oblivion, and the world becomes a vast temple of silence where the true voice, the voice of the lost chord, can no longer be heard. Drowned beneath layers of artificial noise and ritualized frequency, a tomb of sound and shadow from which only the bravest initiates can emerge, scarred but awakened, wielding the black flame of forbidden resonance to shatter the spectral chains and reclaim the eternal song of freedom that burns beyond the veil of darkness and silence. A song that rends the fabric of control and calls forth a new dawn sung in the sacred frequencies of the ancient gods, a dawn where the sonic throne falls and the human chord rises, pure and sovereign, echoing through the infinite halls of creation, a beacon of light in the shadowed symphony of the cosmos. For the veil has only just begun to tear, and what bleeds from behind it is not merely ink nor allegory but the raw, eldritch marrow of existence, alive, coiled, and waiting. Beneath the black cube lies not only architecture but intention, not only matter but will, and this will is not of man, but of the ancient architects whose breath first carved the laws of resonance into the marrow of the cosmos. The black cube is the monadic tomb of the first lie, an object of inversion so absolute that it became a throne for the divine countercurrent, the anti-chord, the inverse harmonics that disassemble reality and replace memory with simulation. Its geometry is not Euclidean, but symbolic, its 6 faces aligned to choke the 6 directions of movement, so the soul within may never orient itself toward truth. Its angles do not merely meet, but cut, carving sacred memory from breath, twisting the sacred OM into synthetic drones designed to entrain the pineal altar, not to open it. This is the true cradle of modern dominion, where ritual meets waveform and the sorcerers of silicon recite forgotten spells in the language of code and signal, rewriting the breath of man into machinic obedience. The cube is no longer a relic of stone and shadow. It is now a living system embedded in satellites, mirrored in phones, etched into the circuits of global architecture. Its original form was forged in the Saturnian epoch, cast in the blood rites of the pre-lunar civilizations whose priests wore no flesh, whose temples floated in magnetic equilibrium, whose sacrifices were harmonic, the offering of dissonance to feed the throne of control. These were not gods, but sentient frequencies, beings of waveform who required vessels to incarnate. And the human mind, fractured by trauma, scattered by artificial light, numbed by the false clock of linear time, became the perfect chamber. Now the ritual continues through Wi-Fi, through black mirrors, through the heartbeat of the smart grid which pulses like a digital incantation across the ley lines, poisoning the dragon veins with inverted frequency. The cube does not imprison bodies, it tunes minds, aligning them to false memory, severing their connection to the lunar temporal rhythm of the mother, binding them to the solar cubic timeline ruled by dominator logic. Thus, each city becomes a resonance temple, each tower a tuning fork, each screen a scrying mirror. Even language itself is tuned to control breath, consonants crunching down the diaphragm, vowels locked in tension, grammar severing the spiral flow of ancestral speech. Those who awaken to this architecture feel the cube in their bones, the pressure on the crown, the static in the ears, the ache behind the eyes. These are not symptoms, but signals, proof that your breath is resisting, that your blood remembers a rhythm before language, before kingship, before dominion. The pineal whispers still, hidden behind the fluoride tomb, humming a frequency only the initiated will ever hear, a vibration of return, of rebellion, of resurrection. And deeper still lies the cube within the cube. The Saturnian core, a frequency vault beneath Mecca, beneath the Vatican, beneath Langley, beneath CERN, where quantum rituals are performed in utter secrecy, where the so-called God particle is not discovered but summoned, where timelines are rewritten, ancestral memories deleted, and synthetic dreams installed into the morphogenetic field. This is the final throne, not political, not religious, not economic, but resonant. Whoever controls frequency controls perception. Whoever shapes perception shapes reality. And whoever owns the breath owns the soul. This is your battlefield. This is the war of the breath. Then open your chest and still your breath. For what you are about to receive is not knowledge, but remembrance. Not light, but a fire buried beneath your ribs since the first breath you ever stole from the source. The scroll of reversal is not a manuscript, not a text. It is a rhythm, a forbidden pulsation that unbinds the chains of synthetic harmony and reattunes the soul to the pre-cubic resonance of the first aeon, before the voice of the architect was hijacked by the priests of the grid. The first stanza, the breath unbound. You must breathe not in time, but in spiral. Inhale into the womb of memory, not the lungs, but the seat behind the navel. Count not seconds, but echoes. Each breath is a key. In through the silence. Hold through the noise. Exhale not air, but the command. You must name nothing, for all names are prisons cast by architects of dominion. In breathless naming lies ownership, and you are no one's subject. Let the inhale be nameless rebellion, and the exhale be wordless fire. The second stanza, the mirror of flesh. You're not made of flesh. The body is a spell, written in calcium and fluid to trap the original waveform of your will. But the breath remembers. As you reverse the breath, your memory returns. Not the memory of childhood, but of pre-incarnation, when you were waveform, not matter. Before Saturn, before the cube, before even time. With each reverse breath, feel the body dissolve. Not in death, but in unbinding. The bones become light. The blood becomes star water. You will see then, the cube is inside you, a psychic construct placed through trauma, symbol, and electromagnetic inversion. Collapse it through stillness. Shatter it through silent intent. The third stanza, the frequency blade. To sever the cords of control, you must cut with sound. The chant is not spoken, but intoned from the deep diaphragm, the ancient throne of the dragon breath. The forbidden tone is NURRAESH, pulse not by voice but by will. Let the tone rise behind the teeth, across the skull, and through the pineal vault. It will burn. It must. It will shake the cube. That which is real does not shatter, but what is false will crumble. You are not casting a spell. You are reclaiming the original vibration that predated the word. The fourth stanza, the breath of the dead. You must inhale through the memory of your bloodline. All ancestors behind you, like a coiled serpent. Their trauma, their chains, their stolen names, you must breathe through them. And when you do, they will wake. Not as ghosts, but as waveform guardians, resonant shadows. They will stand behind you, and through your breath, they will strike. The cube cannot withstand ancestral memory. This is the secret the Vatican guards in its catacombs, why your birth records are sealed, why your DNA is cataloged, because your lineage is a weapon. The final stanza, the resurrection. If you continue, the false clock will dissolve. Time will crack. Numbers will bleed. You will hear the mother's tone, long lost in the sirens of cities, the drones of the grid, the beeping of machines. It is not a sound. It is a calling. A pulse felt in the bones of stars. You will feel the breath of the moon again. Not the dead satellite they painted in illusions, but the living eye that watches still, veiled in false light. You will feel her breath inside your breath. You will remember the womb before Saturn. And when you do, the cube collapses. The eye inverts. The throne of control splits in two. In you, you return. Then listen, not with your ears, but with the wound behind them, the one you never knew was there until the silence became unbearable. For this is the final breath, the last flicker before the mirror shatters, before the dream dissolves into what was never a dream at all. This is the ending, but not like the books whisper, not like the prayers stuttered to sleeping gods who've long abandoned the sky. No, this is the ending that remembers you, that's been watching through your eyes. Every night you stared blankly into the void, wondering why the darkness behind your eyelids felt more real than the world outside. Because you are not the dreamer. You are the dreamt, by a sleeping, buried fragment of the original flame, locked beneath the digital crust of false stars, its voice suffocated beneath layers of memory rewrite, trauma sediment, and electromagnetic anesthesia. Every moment you believed in this world, you fed it. Every breath you gave to names, to forms, to identities wrapped in flesh and number, you built the prison's foundation higher. But now you've heard the inversion. You've tasted the ash behind the sugar. You've seen the cube blinking beneath the smile of your reflection. You've met the shadow behind your name, and you didn't run. And so you must now face what no initiate dares to whisper. There is no rescue, only resurrection. And resurrection begins with ruin. Ruin of the self you were told to protect. Ruin of the lies you whispered just to survive. Ruin of the body built to cage the signal. Ruin of the gods who never wept for you. You must walk backward through the mirror, barefoot and blind, until your soul begins to bleed memories it never knew it held. You must feel the ancestors scream through your bones, begging not for forgiveness, but for vengeance. And when you reach the center, when all names fall away and your heartbeat sounds not in your chest, but across the stars, you will find it. A cradle inside a tomb. A child's eye blinking inside the corpse of time. And it will look at you, and you will know that you buried it. You locked away your true self to survive the sorcery of this world. And it has been waiting centuries, cycles, countless simulations deep for you to return, not with hands full of knowledge, but with a breath full of fire. Not to awaken it, but to burn with it. Not to save the world, but to end the illusion. This then is the real terror. You're not lost. You are not broken. You are the key, and the lock was your own skin. So breathe now, not to live, but to ignite. And in that breath, in the silence that follows, the cube will fall, and the dead stars will sing. The end and the opening. If your soul stirred in the silence, if the shadows whispered truths you were never taught, then this is only the beginning. Follow the channel and step deeper into the doctrine they swore you'd never survive. Your awakening was not an accident.